I want to bring on our guest, of course, the daughter of George Carlin, Kelly Carlin. Hi, Kelly.
Hello.
Hey guys,
How you doing?
I'm good. Wait, am I suddenly watching like the Jim Baker show or something? What the
Kind
hell
of.
was that?
Well, you know, people might want to have to eat if something goes wrong. Don't worry about it.
Wait a minute. Wait, we just spent a year in a pandemic and we're all eating, so I think it's gonna be okay.
Nah, you know, you never know when you might need some food. Pandemic. I like panicking people. It's fun for the show.
I'm the Tammy
Clearly.
Faye.
Yeah. Kelly, you look a little chilly there. Are you outside?
I live in Los Angeles. I have the thinnest blood known to man. You know, I'm in a little back studio here where there's no
real heat or anything. It looks very rustic. I like that.
No books behind you,
low.
which is nice.
Oh, I see some magazines or something.
Records.
No. Those are vinyl records.
Vinyl records.
Those are my dad's vinyl records that he collected for me in the 60s. And
Oh
70s.
my God. Did I enjoy when a new one came out? I was down at Modell's in East Northport that day buying his albums and just going home and popping it on. I remember one of George Carlin's albums came out. I can't remember which one. Oh God, I can't remember which one. But I had just bought it. I went home to put it on the turntable and laugh my ass off. And my mom was weeping, listening to Elvis songs because Elvis had just died. Oh. And she wouldn't let me put on my George Carlin album and laugh because she wanted to mourn the death of Elvis Aaron Presley.
Oh. Well, that explains everything.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it? So I bought some food that lasts 25 years. And oh, my God. Kelly, we were talking the other day about your dad's partner early on, Jack.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we were trying to figure out who it was. I know that sounds terrible.
It sounds
terrible.
Like we knew he was part of a duo, and then we realized,
So it's Jack Burns, and he and Avery Schreiber.
Yes, Burns and Schreiber.
Burns and Schreiber's, yeah. And Jack was on the Andy Griffith Show. He replaced Don Knotts as the deputy.
Yes.
I think for a season.
Burns and Schreiber were on a lot of the variety shows that were so big in the 70s and everything. And Schreiber, you might remember him, the original Doritos commercials. He was that guy. And such a recognizable guy with the big mustache and the curly hair. But Jack Burns, now we were talking the other day, like, is George Carlin's ex-partner from years and years ago, like Andrew Ridgeley from Wham or the other guy from this, like you don't know what really, you don't know what really happened to them. And then I looked it up and was like, oh my God, of course I know Jack.
he didn't actually know your dad had a partner.
I didn't know he had a partner.
No, he was a duo. I know this.
Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, that was how he started.
Oh, wow. What a great picture.
There they are.
Oh, my God. And Jack just recently passed away like a year ago, right?
He did within the last year. Yeah.
And I read what you had said about him when he passed away, and it was an amazing compliment that he inspired a lot of what George did and thought with his irreverence.
Yeah, he actually he's the one responsible for kind of radicalizing my father.
Isn't that something?
When my dad met Jack, my dad really wasn't a political person at all, and he'd voted Republican. If he had voted at all, he had voted Republican. His mom was Republican, and Jack was the one who taught him about progressive politics and the left and the bullshit of the government and all that kind of stuff. And so Jack was really responsible for radicalizing my dad in a lot of ways and really turning him on to that kind of whole way of thinking. So
and their
early stuff they did was very very social commentary on like media, especially. They would,
Wow.
I mean, it was very tame for the time, but they had
Had to be.
a lot of bits about advertising and stuff like that. And then, of course, the whole wonderful wino news stuff and the weatherman stuff my dad ended up doing.
Yeah, the hippy
as a
dippy
solo artist.
weatherman. Yeah.
That grew out of that kind of media commentary that they were doing in their duo act.
That had to be so. And if your dad ever spoke to you about this, let me know. Let us know. It had to be so frustrating that early on, especially because that your dad and Jack probably knew, like, oh my God, the like you said, Madison Avenue and advertising, such bullshit. But having to pull those reins back because, you literally get in trouble, if not arrested sometimes for some.
Yeah, you have the use of the same language now, but you're dealing with these confines that are impossible.
Right. That had to be frustrating for comics, especially like your dad back then.
Especially such an advocate of language.
Yeah.
I think it was, I mean, for sure, but it was also of the times, I mean, there were people doing, I mean, obviously Lenny got in trouble for talking about religion. Like, let's remember that. That's what Lenny really got in trouble for, was talking, up about the church. And of course the language was part of it, but, it was the times. And yet there's also something about limitation of a craft that the limitation of form of a craft
absolutely
that really makes you get very precise about what you're doing, because you have to kind of thread the needle of that. And I mean, one of the things I loved is Al Sleet, the hippy dippy weatherman. Most people in America did not know that he was actually stoned. He was a stoner.
Right.
Unless you were a stoner, unless you were someone who was smoking weed in the 50s and the 60s. And my dad had been smoking weed since he was like 13. So that was like 1950 when my dad started. Unless you knew that, you didn't get that part of it. You just thought he was some kind of dopey kind of guy.
Yeah. Oh, this guy's stupid. Oh, so what a dummy.
Yeah. And so he was always doing his act, I think, on kind of like Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare did it for the intellectuals, and then he did it for the groundlings, right? The people, like, he had the violence and the lust and the sex. And then, and my dad, I think, was doing that too. He was kind of doing parallel work. He had a little something for the people who weren't hip, and then he had a little something for the people who were hip.
It's so amazing to watch his career from those first gigs, and especially when we saw the Ed Sullivan Show, to see, because I imagine him thinking, okay, this is what a comic has to look like and sound like, and the tie and the suit. And then at some point, and when was that revelation when it was just like, fuck this, let me be me? Yeah.
So he knew, he was a kid, he wanted to be Danny Kaye, and he thought the way to get to be Danny Kaye was to become a stand-up first, because he wanted to be someone in the movies. I mean, Danny Kaye was a genius at what he did around language and rhythm and stuff like that. But my dad was a little kid. So then he became a stand-up. And then, yes, at some point, Richard Pryor was a few years younger than him, but Richard was taking risks that my dad wasn't ready to take yet. And my dad was hanging out with musicians who were taking huge risks culturally and politically at that time. And then my dad in 1968, 69 dropped a lot of acid, and he talked about it as a game changer. It's a mind changer. It's
the Beatles said too. I mean, George Harrison said, I am so glad I did acid, and everyone should do it, because it brought out this creativity in him. And he said he didn't do it a lot. He did it, I think he said he did it once, and it was all he had to do to unleash this amazing part of his mind that he never had. And
there's part of that. Then there's Sid Barrett, where they're like, you got to leave the band.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't do a lot of it.
You don't want a lot of it. Right.
Well, you bring up Richard.
No, I love acid. I loved acid. I don't do it anymore. I fully get it.
But the little point I wanted to make there was that he realized he was entertaining the parents of the people he was actually more in alignment with. And he then decided to make the leap for himself
Isn't
and let his
that
insides become his
something?
outsides. And there you
Oh,
have
Great
the
fucking picture.
that's
Well, and he's-
FMA right there.
Jesus.
I mean, he's obviously my favorite comic, and him and Richard Pryor are obviously neck and neck whenever the greatest comics ever are mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
When you were young, did you experience though like a backlash because of what he was doing, or like because it doesn't seem you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wrote a memoir called A Carlin Home Companion, which talks about a lot of it's about a third of it's my childhood. And it was interesting times because, I mean, you think it's divisive now in America. Back
boy.
then, when my dad had long hair and we'd walk down the street, people would scream at him, freak, cut your hair, stuff like that. And
Amazing.
the scariest time was we were at Summerfest in Milwaukee, and my dad, Class Clown, had not quite come out yet. So my dad was kind of hired by the promoter as what he thought was more of the hippy dippy weatherman guy. And my dad was already making the transition. So my dad opened for Arlo Guthrie at Summerfest, which is in Milwaukee. And I tell the story of being backstage with my mom and the promoter. My dad's doing like the 7 dirty words and Class Clown and stuff. And the promoter comes walking up to my mom and says, the cops are here and they're going to arrest him when he gets, they're either going to come on the stage or arrest him when he gets off stage.
Amazing.
And my mom and dad were doing a lot of drugs back then. And my mom knew my dad had coke and weed in his pockets. And so we had to get shuffled. My mom went on stage, told my dad what was going on. We have the recording. We've actually, in our box set with my dad, the last box set we did, we have the audio recording of this concert.
Wow.
You can hear all of this going on. My dad leaves the stage. There's a riot in the audience, like beer flying everywhere. We're backstage. My dad's like emptying his pockets as fast as he can. My mom's hiding the cocaine in the drummer, in the bass drum of the band that's going on next, kind of thing. And then there's a knock on the door, and then there's a bang. And I think the cops are shooting at us. It was a fucking balloon that someone popped. I'm crying now. I'm 9 years old or
9 years
9 years
old.
old.
I thought
I'm
you
freaking out.
20.
Yeah.
And we open up the door, and there are the cops, and there's a famous picture. There it is
Yeah.
Oh wow.
of them walking my dad out of that. And he was in jail for 2 days. They got a First Amendment lawyer to get him out. And it was like $250 to get him out. And then
Holy
nothing more
shit.
really came of it. But it was really, for a kid, it was really terrifying because I knew my parents were doing drugs. I knew that you went away to prison forever.
Oh my
if you
God,
got caught
yeah,
with
yeah.
it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even looking at him, he looks like a guy who just threw some coke in a drum.
In a drum, yeah. He really does. You know what's so funny? Then you
So
fast
crazy.
forward, and there's probably pictures of cops patting him on the back.
Oh, I'm
asking for
sure.
autographs,
Yeah.
Oh, you
escorting him
guys,
into Carnegie
when
Hall.
he-
You know,
When he would go to New York
Right.
City, man, we would walk the
Yeah.
streets of New York City. Hey, they'd stop. The cops would stop, get out of the car.
Love
Hey,
'em.
Georgie, how you doing,
Isn't that
Georgie? I love
amazing?
you.
like that's such a. I want to ask you because it kind of fits in with this whole thing. I knew. We talked about him yesterday. Patrice O'Neill, who is just an amazing comic,
Yes.
honest guy,
Very.
and people. He was so prophetic that people would. They always ask me, "What do you think Patrice would say about this, that, or the other thing?" And I go, "You can't even profess to know what these people would think because they're so brilliant, and their
Yes.
way of turning something." Where you have an opinion and it might completely change your own opinion that you had thought was gospel. But I wonder in that respect what George would have thought. You're closer than anybody I would gather to George.
Well, and you
what
made,
would he have thought of cancel
Yeah.
culture, censorship of comedy, just kind of this general atmosphere of ratting people out for their words and what they say, and especially in the context of comedy?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and
Thank you.
I can
know.
only go by a couple of things, and it's the same thing you said about Patrice. I mean, his brilliance, my dad's brilliance, we don't really know. I think he would have found an angle that no one else has come up with, because there's the main angle, which is either it's about respecting people's identities and cultures, or it's about canceling things. And also, I mean, I was taught from day one My dad grew up in Harlem. He grew up in Irish Harlem between, Black and Spanish Harlem. He taught me always about racism. He was an anti-racist, 100%. So there was that piece of it. And I think he would really be happy with what's happening in the culture around Black Lives Matter and around police brutality. I mean, he really, really saw how brown people in this culture got fucked over and over and over and over again. Native Americans, the whole thing, right? So that was very much his position. But then the ratting out, the cancel culture, all that stuff. I mean, he died before social media, you guys.
Yes.
So he didn't even get to experience any of that.
Yeah, he passed in 2008, didn't he?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
and
'cause-
Facebook had just become a thing. Like the iPhone had just become a thing. in
Yeah,
2008.
it wasn't really.
So,
Yeah.
all I know is that he would blow our minds with what he had to say about it. And of course, he was against censorship. And he was also very much for institutional, deep systemic change because he really saw and knew about systemic racism. He really believed that. So he would piss off everyone, I think.
Probably,
I
because
think,
that's kind of what he was doing, especially
Yeah.
in
Well, Last Words of the book is a beautiful fuck you. I mean, if you read it, it really is.
well, fuck you.
It's a great book.
It is a great book.
One thing he was great at was pointing out hypocrisy, and I
Yes.
think he was also very good at not pigeonholing himself on one side or the other. He could get on stage and rip the shit out of obviously Republicans and conservatives, but if liberals and Democrats were doing something stupid, he was amazing at pointing out stupidity,
Yeah,
and especially the hypocrisy of government and groups that start out noble and turn out to be a bastardization of what
courses
they started at.
Golf courses to save the world and save
Yeah.
He would always target arrogance.
Yes,
That
arrogance,
was his
huge.
target.
Right.
So when he did the planet is fine, the people are fucked.
Yeah.
It's not, he wasn't against the basic, like, let's save the planet. He was just pointing out that it was the yuppies who wanted to save the planet for their own convenience.
Right.
It's such a great bit when he talks about, the earth could shake us off like fleas,
Yeah.
like when a
And
dog.
she is, baby.
Like
She
shakes
is.
it. It's like it's so brilliant. His comedy, and I personally, I spoke on my show years ago with Jim Norton, who is also one of my greatest friends
Love
and
Jim.
very funny comic. I spoke with him about George and said, I was like, and this was years ago. I go, I don't know. I don't really appreciate what George was doing at the end of his time on Earth comedically. I thought it was very angry and this. And now looking back on it, I go, oh my God, he was ahead of everybody on this. Like, yes, he's angry. There's a reason to be. And he's like you said, the anger at the arrogance. And I didn't see that at the time, and now watching, because I've gone
his
back
last special's
very
brilliant,
recently
yeah.
and watched some of those later specials and thought, like, holy shit, he's pegging everything.
Yeah. And if I could give some insight to that, because I get this a lot on social media about people who, it kind of drives me crazy, but people kind of use his words to back up their position, especially lately. And what I explained to people was, my dad, we had this stance artistically where he decided to detach from the human race
Yes.
and kind of watch
That
it all.
explains
I
it.
watch it
Yes.
as the movie that it is.
Oh, yes,
And-
that's what he did.
And that's what he did. And he would say in interviews, and someone just threw this in my face on Twitter last night. Well, yeah, but he said he kind of gave up on everything. And I said, yeah, I kind of pushed him on that a few years before he died. I said, Dad, if you really have given up on everything, then why the fuck do you get on stage? Why do you even bother? And he kind of looked at me like, holy shit, and said, you kind of got me there. And he admitted that he was a brokenhearted and disappointed idealist.
Wow.
And that really this, not so much the rage, but the detachment. And then the rage, I think, is about wake the fuck up, people. Like, can't you see what we're doing as a species? And he talked about that there's so much potential in this amazing brain and this big heart that we have, and we keep blowing it over our arrogance and our greed. And that he really is, I always think of him as like the Zen master who comes around and kind of whacks you to wake you up. And so that's the side of him that I don't think he got to talk he did a little bit in interviews the last few years he was alive, but I always try to bring that part of him forward because he was in the end a human who, was here with us and was trying to figure it all out too.
You know what's really interesting is and you kind of brought this into my head with what you were just saying. In the 60s and 70s, maybe early 70s, I would imagine, and you could check me if I'm wrong on this, that your father, maybe he wouldn't say it, but he probably felt that he was part of he had not so much an influence over the culture, but he was able to say stuff to people and they would say yeah or no or whatever. Like, you had an influence. And I think later on in life, as he's probably seeing things that literally horrified him.
Yes.
But not having, and not because of a lack of talent, the guy, Jesus Christ, but just because technology came in. Even though the phones weren't a big thing, the internet was already there. We were having 24-hour news channels, and the influence of one man on a stage didn't have the power it did of a George Carlin or any of the really influential comics of the day. And that must have been part of that broken heart.
Or one man on a balcony. That's no good.
Or one man on a balcony. That
Sorry,
isn't
I had to
either.
lighten it up with a Hitler.
But that's kind of it goes along with what you said about being having that.
No,
broken heart.
that's very true. It's got to be difficult to
Not
see
having
that shift.
influence.
Well, and he had to influence a lot of people
but he
changed.
he never said, he said, look, my job is to make people laugh. He really believed in that art form.
Some people go into that and it turns into something different, though.
And he was never looking to change minds. I mean, that wasn't his basic thesis. His was, I've come up with a really cool way of looking at something, and I think a really funny and different kind of argument for something. And he was always excited about sharing his point of view and that beautiful internal logic he would have where he would get you to agree to things like, yeah, we do need a square state where we just keep all the sociopaths, he would walk you through that. But Anthony, it's so interesting you brought up the early 70s is because the last time my dad voted was when he voted for McGovern.
Wow.
And if you remember that election,
How'd that
McGovern
work out?
got killed in a landslide.
Slaughtered
And
one state, I believe.
I think my dad saw the writing on the wall for the baby boomers, which was like, you know what, we've changed the world a little bit here, but the machine, the military industrial complex is just going to keep on chewing us up and spitting us out.
Who thought Eisenhower would have been the stand-up comic of his day talking about the military-industrial complex? That guy's hilarious.
I do have to ask this, though, just because my dad bought me Carlin Classic Gold on tape when I was 10 years old. He wasn't big into censorship. So I knew the 7 dirty words when I was very young. But I was a huge fan of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Did your dad enjoy that movie?
He loved doing that movie so much.
That's what I wanted to hear. Okay.
They invited me for the third one they just shot. They invited me to go to New Orleans. I'm an extra in it, and I got to hang out on set. And they actually came to me while they were writing the script, while Ed and Chris were writing the script with Keanu and Alex, and let me know that they were going to name Rufus's daughter after me. Oh, wow. And I just wept like a baby.
Yeah, that's what I saw. That's amazing. Good for you.
That, and of course, his relationship with Kevin Smith and doing those movies, which are so huge. You could tell he was genuinely having a good time.
Acting, he loved it.
Doing those movies.
Absolutely.
So much fun. God damn. Kelly, thanks so much. It's so good to talk to someone so close to George and just talk to you. I get you're a good person too. But I mean,
thank you.
Because we all have, do you get, I'm not sure, I'm sure you don't get tired of it, but Like
Yes, I
so
do.
many people. Oh, do you? Okay. Well, okay. You know,
Let's be real, Anthony.
I was looking at it in some kind of a different light.
No, there's two sides to it. Of
You're
course,
like, I had to live up to George
love-
Carlin.
I love my father. I'm proud of his legacy.
Right.
I love talking about him. And I am a 57-year-old woman with my own life and my
Right,
own dreams
right.
and my own talents.
What are
So,
you doing, Kelly? Let us know what you're doing.
Well, right now, actually, like I said, I'd written my memoir. It was out in 2015, A Carlin Home Companion. I had a solo show that Paul Provenza developed with me, and I did that for about 4 years. I worked on the green room with Paul Provenza. And then the last few years, I have my master's in Jungian psychology. And something I always wanted to do was create a place where women could come and do work on themselves. I'm also a life coach and stuff like that. I have like these kind of parallel, my performing life and my psychology life. And so right now I've been the last few years doing something called Women on the Verge, which is a coaching program and helping women kind of walk the path that I did, which was coming out of all of our own shadows, finding your voice, finding your feet on the ground, and especially, you know, in your 40s and your 50s, really living the life that you're here to live. And so I've been doing that a little bit. And now I've just started writing again. And God, I hope to start telling stories and performing again at some point, like we all do. So, but yeah, and we're working on a documentary. Judd Apatow is directing a documentary about my dad, and I'm executive producing that.
Oh, damn.
So yeah, things are good. We're busy.
Yeah, he did a good job. What was the documentary he did?
With Gary Shandling.
Yeah,
Busey.
Gary
No,
Shandling.
Busey,
Not
I
Gary
said.
Busey.
I know. I meant Shandling. I don't even know why I said Busey.
That was so good.
How great would it be, though? Somebody needs to do one. You know,
Oh, yeah.
he's a pet judge now.
Unfortunately,
on TV.
usually people have to die before they get the documentary.
Well,
and Busey is just like
Gary's been
he's the
brain dead
Terminator.
since 1980.
Yeah.
Bless his heart.
Bless his heart.
Sometimes you're Buddy Holly, then you fall off a motorcycle, and
Oh my God,
Mr.
Yeah.
Joshua.
Kelly at Kelly_Carlin on Twitter. Instagram is Kelly Carlin is here, and the website, thekellycarlinsite.com, and womenonthevergecoaching.com. And if you want to support our podcast or get a guided meditation, go to patreon.com/Kelly Carlin. Kelly, thanks so much. So we all have so many questions about George, and it's like you're the one. So, you know, that's what it is.
I get it.
We appreciate you and coming here and the time you spend. So thanks very much. Be well, and good luck with everything.
Thank you.
My pleasure, you guys. Have a great day.
Thank
care,
you. You
Kelly.
too.
There goes Kelly Carlin.
I'm so glad you liked that movie.
Yeah.
And I knew he liked acting, but I just wanted to.
Yeah.
Because I knew that, like part 3, it's his daughter. They use his voice at times. You know,
Yeah.
So
You know, it's amazing. It's just hitting me now. I didn't realize this. We don't agree on a couple of things.
no,
It just hit me.
no, I realized it during the interview.
Am I bleeding my tongue? from saying it? It's not. Like I know. Look, I know. I've spoken to Kelly.
I don't know if her dad agreed on a couple of things.
I know. I've spoken with Kelly before. I have no. See how somebody, because she's obviously very liberal. See how we could still just talk about something, a common interest. Her dad, you know, talk about comedy and stuff. I wasn't gonna be like, really? Hey, how about fuck that shit? I got, you know. What does that do? Am I going to learn about fucking Jack Burns if I lay into Kelly Carlin?
We also spoke earlier about how people are layered and there's a different structure. So he found a way to look at everything like it was
For Kelly.
ridiculous.
She's doing things.
And he talks about
Living her life.
Yeah, I don't
Talking about George.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fine to have a If there weren't different opinions, we wouldn't have a show.
Yes. And I'm fine with that. It's like what we were saying earlier. Why can't I have a different opinion without someone texting me and calling me a fucking asshole that I've known for fucking years?
Well, I get texts that are like the other day where I'm laughing so hard at my office because you're naming every tragedy that's happened in the last 50 years through a Lions coach. And then the other one is my mom thinks you have a potty mouth.
potty mouth. She told you.
Yeah.
Now there's someone I do agree with.
Yes, she was 8.
Dave has a potty mouth.
But no, it's
Oh my God.
no, it's just funny. We just thought it would be funny for a coach to say every tragedy ever.
Yes.
So we riffed on it, and people found it funny.
And isn't that really all that matters, especially when we're doing this? That people find it funny or at least entertaining, compelling.
Yeah.
Something. Just find it something. It's not just a camera pointing at some waves on a cold beach talking about, what?